What were these activists on trial for, Emma?
Well, back in 2020, they held an unofficial primary to try to pick pro-democracy candidates that they thought would have a really good chance of winning a majority in an election that was scheduled for later that year. And they wanted to use the control they got in that election to try to demand greater democracy or to oppose the government's budget, which would have forced the resignation of the chief executive, who was someone called Carrie Lam, who's backed by Beijing at that time.
Now it's the second week after the implementation of national security law. Our voice hope to be represented by our vote and let Beijing to realize that people in Hong Kong choose not to kowtow to China.
I do think it is my civil rights and my responsibility to come out and to represent myself and others similar.
But under a national security law that Beijing brought in that year, that activity basically became tantamount to subversion. Whereas the defendants' lawyers would say that really what they'd done was just kind of normal political dealing. The election was then postponed for over a year, which the authorities said was because of COVID-19 measures. But in that time, they also arrested the 47 and they changed the rules to exclude those not deemed patriotic to Beijing from politics.
But this isn't just about excluding a group of people from the political process, is it? What do the convictions mean for the territory?
Well, they really represent the kind of ongoing strangulation of any kind of dissent in Hong Kong. You know, the government initially said that the national security laws would be used sparingly, but at least 244 people have been arrested under it since then. And NGOs say that thousands more have been charged under separate laws for advocating for democracy. And none of those accused under the national security law who've gone to trial were found innocent until the 2 acquittals that we saw on Thursday last week.
So those 2 acquittals are quite interesting. Do they suggest that some kind of justice is actually happening in Hong Kong?
Possibly. There's still a very strong independent legal system in the majority of cases. But when it comes to the national security law, you know, there was a 100% conviction rate until Thursday. Possibly those 2 acquittals do suggest that there is still a bit of independence, even when it comes to the national security law. Others have suggested that the government was actually just getting embarrassed about the conviction rate, although it has already said that it will appeal. And things are only getting worse in Hong Kong. In March, the territory actually enacted a new national security law known as Article 23, which broadens and runs alongside the existing law imposed by Beijing in 2020.
And has Article 23 been changing things for protesters in Hong Kong, particularly in the run-up to June the 4th?
Well, last week we saw the first arrests under the new measure. They were related to some social media posts about the June 4th anniversary of Tiananmen Square. And one of those arrested was Chow Hang-tung, who was one of the original organisers of the vigils, who's already in prison for other national security law charges. And police also arrested her mum, and yesterday they actually arrested her uncle too. So he became the 8th person to be arrested under the new law. So all of that has really meant that the atmosphere in the city ahead of the Tiananmen anniversary has been one of sort of quiet resignation. As one person who attended the vigils almost every year when they were running told me.
Yeah, makes me feel very sad. I look forward to going every year. I look forward to joining the rest of that, however many people, Hong Kongers. I feel a loss. I feel, as well, nothing we can do. It's helpless, you know, in commemorating this event and share, just momentarily, that sentiment.
So there's a real sense that people are very on edge here.
Emma, you're painting a grimmer and grimmer picture of Hong Kong. It sounds increasingly like mainland China. Is there a difference still between the two?
I think in terms of political freedom, not really. The national security laws are bringing Hong Kong and the mainland ever closer together, and Article 23 will probably ensure that the last embers of judicial independence flicker out. And as we see with the Tiananmen Square remembrance, for many years, 30 years, that was a sort of really clear example of the way in which Hong Kong was far more independent than the mainland. And the fact that now remembrance of Hong Kong, not just in terms of the vigils, but even in terms of books about the massacre, for example, being removed from bookshelves, all the kind of memories of Tiananmen are being snuffed out. And that's bringing Hong Kong, therefore, much closer to the mainland.